They laughed at my mother during my wedding. Mocked her, dismissed her, called her a mistaken address, in front of 200 people. And the worst part? My fiancé laughed with them. That was the moment I stood up, not just from my chair, but for everything my mother had ever done for me. I walked away from the altar, from the lies, and from the people who thought silence was strength. But this isn't just a story about walking out. It's about reclaiming dignity. It's about tearing down empires built on polished cruelty. It's about building something better, from scratch and from truth. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or silenced. If you've ever had to choose between pleasing people and honoring your roots, this story is for you. Subscribe to ErasedMe, where stories like this aren't just told. They're remembered. And they're rewritten. The chandeliers sparkled like crystal constellations above the ballroom, casting a golden glow over the 100-and-something guests who sipped champagne like it was liquid relevance. Everything was perfect, at least on paper. Ivory tablecloths, silver cutlery, a string quartet rehearsing Vivaldi in the corner. If you looked quickly, you'd think this wedding was a love story. But I sat there, numb, glass of water sweating in my hand, feeling more like a guest at my own undoing. Next to me, my mother sat quietly. Her posture was perfect, her hands folded in her lap. She wore a navy blue dress she'd altered herself the night before, found on clearance, stitched and pinned to dignity. Her hair, of course, flawless, an elegant updo she crafted in our tiny apartment with just 2 pins and a dab of mousse. Someone at the neighboring table whispered, "Did she do that herself?" I heard it. She did. Of course she did. The wedding booklet rested in my lap like a silent insult. Inside, glossy pages sang praises of Adam's family, doctors, real estate moguls, legacy fund donors. My mother? Listed without a last name. Just Pam, hair artist. Heart of gold. Not a single mention that she raised me alone, that she worked 3 jobs, that she sacrificed her own dreams so I could chase mine. She was reduced to a Hallmark tagline, quaint, sweet, small. A waiter passed by with hors d'oeuvres we couldn't pronounce, and I forced a smile as guests offered Adam hugs and praises like he was the centerpiece of it all. He grinned, shook hands, charmed. It was his stage. I was just the prop standing beside him in a designer gown paid for by my savings and 1,000 nights of skipped lattes. Then Ronald, Adam's father, stood up. The room quieted as he raised his glass. Tonight, he began, voice rich with pride and subtle condescension, we celebrate not just love, but achievement. The story of a young woman who rose above her background. Because this, he gestured around the room, is America, where anyone, even a girl with a comb in her hand, can find herself at a table like this. Polite laughter. The kind that feels rehearsed. I saw my mother's fingers tighten around her fork, her knuckles pale. But she didn't flinch. Deborah, Adam's mother, stood next, wine glass glinting like a weapon under the lights. Monica, she said sweetly, has a certain grace. A humility. The kind of refinement that doesn't come from schools, but from life. And I know she gets it from her mother. She turned to look at my mom, smiled. The ability to see beauty in simplicity. The kind of hands that shape others, even without formal training. What some might call, golden hands. A smile. A sip. A dagger. I felt the burn rise in my chest. The guests smiled and nodded like this was some grand tribute. But it wasn't. It was a polished insult wrapped in honeyed words. And then came the final blow. I stepped away for air, just a minute to breathe. That's when I overheard it. Deborah, standing with a couple whose names I didn't even know, said, clear as crystal, Monica looked stunning, truly. Couture bride all the way. But her mother? A pause. A sip of wine. Honestly, I thought she was someone's +1. That's not a mother. That's a mistaken address. Laughter. Soft, sharp, slicing. I froze. Her words slapped harder than any hand. And Adam? He was there. He laughed. Not a big, booming laugh. Just a quiet chuckle, the kind that cuts deep because it's real. I looked at him. He didn't even flinch. My vision blurred, but not from tears, from clarity. That was the moment something cracked. Not my heart. My patience. My belief in the version of love I had built with him. Because if a man could laugh while his mother mocked mine, then maybe he wasn't a partner at all, just another echo of a world I didn't belong in. And in that echo, my voice rose. But that part of the story came next. I walked back to the table slowly, the sounds of clinking glasses and murmured laughter melting into a distant hum. My mother sat quietly, eyes on her plate, the corners of her lips pulled into that familiar smile, the one she wore whenever the world demanded her silence. She looked at me as I slid back into my chair, her gaze calm, like she knew what I had just heard but hoped, maybe, I'd let it pass. "You okay, honey?" she asked softly. I nodded once. That was a lie. Adam leaned in, brushing crumbs from his cuff like none of it mattered. "Hey," he whispered, "don't let them get to you. It's just how they joke. You know they love you." I stared at him. My heart didn't break, it hardened. "Is that what this is?" I asked. "Love? Mocking my mother with a glass of Prosecco in hand?" He rolled his eyes slightly, the way people do when they're annoyed that you're ruining their good time. "Come on, Monica. Don't make this a scene. It's our day." I looked at my mother. She reached for my hand beneath the table, gave it a gentle squeeze. "We can take it," she whispered. "It's just one night." And that was the moment something inside me shifted. "No," I said, standing. The music paused. Or maybe I just stopped hearing it. "No," I repeated, louder now. "We don't have to take anything anymore." I turned to face the room. A hush swept over the guests like someone had hit a mute button. Forks paused mid-air. Eyes blinked. And for the first time that night, every single person saw me, not the bride, not the token success story in their curated narrative, but a daughter who had been pushed too far. "Thank you," I said clearly, voice steady. "Thank you for the reminder of who I never want to become." There was no screaming. No glass throwing. Just me, standing in a white dress that suddenly felt like armor. I turned to my mother. "Let's go." We walked away, past the stunned cousins, the disapproving aunts, the carefully composed centerpieces. My heels clicked against the marble floor like punctuation. Behind us, the quartet fumbled for notes, unsure if they should keep playing. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, "Is she serious?" Wrong question. I wasn't ruining my wedding. I was saving my life. The night air hit us like a blessing, cool, real, unscripted. The silence of the city outside the venue was almost disorienting after the weight of chandeliers and false compliments. We didn't speak as we walked, just the rhythm of our footsteps filling the gap where pain would have spilled. We ended up at the 24-hour diner, the one that had been our quiet refuge since I was 13. It still had the same cracked leather booths and menus with coffee stains and corners torn from too many hands flipping through. The waitress behind the counter looked up, blinked, then offered a faint smile of recognition without saying a word. She'd seen us grow here, seen my mom with hairpins tucked behind her ear, seen me in school uniforms and thrifted coats. Mom slid into her usual booth, the one tucked by the wall, beneath the flickering light that always buzzed like it had a secret. I ordered her tea without asking. Black coffee for me. No cream. No sugar. Just warmth and something to hold. She looked up at me over her glasses. "We don't have to hide, honey," she said gently. I met her eyes. "We're not hiding. We're just home. This place, this booth, had seen us through winters with broken heating and summers with empty wallets. I once did my geometry homework right here, balancing a calculator on a ketchup bottle. My mom used to dry my rain-soaked hair with napkins when I forgot my umbrella. Once, we split a slice of lemon pie because we had exactly $6.12 between us, and she insisted I needed sugar to finish a project. But the truth? I never needed sugar. I needed her. She wasn't dramatic. Never cried over bills or slammed doors when groceries ran short. She just got up earlier, worked longer, skipped things no one even knew she wanted. While other moms joined book clubs or posted pictures of yoga brunches, mine juggled mall salons, house calls, and back porch trims for her regulars. She could dye hair, cook dinner, and pay the electric bill all in the same breath, and never called it sacrifice. She called it life. I remember falling asleep on the floor of her salon, curled next to the rolling cart of perm rods and bleach trays. She'd drape an old towel over me and keep working, checking my breathing. Between haircuts. And when Dad left, when his voice disappeared from our home like it had been a figment, she didn't cry. She folded laundry, reheated soup, helped me spell the word resilient. We didn't have legacy funds or private tutors. We had coupons, duct tape, and dreams sewn into sale rack dresses. I used to think we were invisible. Now I realize, my mother was a storm disguised as still water. The kind of strength that doesn't demand attention, but builds foundations. Architecture found me by accident. A field trip to a restructured housing zone, where kids were supposed to see innovation in action. One girl asked why the benches were angled wrong. I replied, because whoever designed this cared about requirements, not residents. The teacher blinked. I didn't. That moment sparked something. I started sketching stairwells on napkins, rearranging sidewalks in my notebook margins. Got a scholarship. Moved to New York. My dorm room could barely fit a bed, but I made it work. Library shifts, cup noodles, late nights. Kept going. Burned out. Kept going. Then came urban bloom. An idea that grew from need, turning abandoned lots into green corners. Community gardens. Safe benches. Space that said, you belong here. 3 years later, we had investors. The city took notice. But even when we launched our first pilot park, my mom still asked, so wait, it's like a makeover, but for sidewalks? I laughed. Something like that. She beamed. Well, then it's beautiful. You're tough, like your forehead. And honestly, that compliment meant more than a TED Talk ever could. That night in the diner, she sipped her tea like nothing was unusual. No one had humiliated her in front of 200 strangers. No one had dismissed her as a footnote. And maybe that's what made her extraordinary. She didn't need the world to recognize her worth. She just needed me to. And I did. Grief can be loud as sobs, slammed doors, breaking things. But betrayal? Betrayal is silent. It sits with you, cold and precise, like the edge of a key you never knew would turn. After that night, I didn't cry. I didn't vent. I didn't even speak Adam's name. I opened my laptop instead. Urban Core Group had always been a shimmering monolith in city development, polished, influential, untouchable. Their name was on high-rises, community centers, even grant boards. And somewhere along the way, my name, my story, had made its way into their investor decks. From humble beginnings, one slide read: Innovative talent from the grassroots. A stock photo of a young girl in a hoodie tagged, inspired by real founder. I wasn't invited to that meeting. Or the next. But my ideas? They always made it into their pitch. That's when I stopped being shocked and started reading footnotes. 3 holding companies. 1 international shell. A trail of votes and stock options tucked neatly behind buzzwords like strategic partnership. So I started buying. Quietly. Cleanly. With help from an old professor turned corporate consultant, a woman who once told me, true architects don't just build structures. They redesign power. It took 3 months. Layer by layer, document by document. Not a single move that wasn't legal. Not a single share that couldn't be traced. But no one saw it coming, because no one thought I mattered enough to check. And why would they? To them, I was still the shiny, charitable success story they could parade around, grateful, smiling, manageable. They didn't know the girl raised on grocery store coupons had learned how to read contracts better than menus. When I hit 52% of the voting shares, I didn't celebrate. I simply closed my browser, brewed a cup of tea the way Mom always did, with extra lemon, and stared out the window. There would be no vengeance. Only correction. They had used my voice in rooms I wasn't invited into. Now I was coming for the keys. The lobby of Urban Core's headquarters smelled like money, polished marble, leather-bound portfolios, imported coffee beans. But to me, it smelled like the end of a myth. I stepped through. The revolving glass doors in a black blazer and low heels, the kind that didn't announce themselves but didn't need to. The receptionist blinked when she saw me. I believe they're expecting me, I said calmly. Upstairs, on the 5th floor, the boardroom buzzed with quiet urgency. I could hear it before the doors opened, the scraping of chairs, the low hum of nervous banter, the forced laughter that only exists when powerful people feel something slipping. And I was that slip. The moment I walked in, silence fell like a curtain. There they were, Ronald with his cufflinks adjusted just so, Deborah in her signature cream suit that cost more than my first year of tuition, Adam in a blazer too crisp for someone who hadn't answered a single call since the wedding. Monica, Deborah said, standing, voice honeyed with artificial warmth. I'm glad you could join us. I placed the folder on the table. I'm glad, too, I replied. Though I didn't come to join. I came to restructure. That flicker of confusion crossed Ronald's eyes, the first sign that the story was no longer theirs to tell. I'm invoking a shareholder vote, I said, opening the folder. Effective as of 9 a.m. this morning, the voting structure has changed. Ronald leaned forward, frowning. What are you talking about? I slid the notarized papers across the table. Urban Bloom, my company, now holds 52% of Urban Core's voting shares, acquired legally, transparently, and with full documentation. You're welcome to have your legal team confirm it. Gasps. Papers rustled. Deborah's smile dropped like a curtain pulled too fast. This isn't that kind of meeting, she said sharply. It is now, I replied. I outlined the changes, a new voting protocol, a conflict of interest clause, and an immediate freeze on all projects pending audit. 3 years of financial records, contract trails, and backdoor deals, every piece was about to be brought into light. Adam shifted in his chair, finally speaking. Monica, come on. This isn't you. You said you wanted to build something together. I did, I said, looking him straight in the eye. I wanted to create. But all you saw was a narrative. You wanted a success story, not a partner. Deborah clutched her pearls, literal pearls, and said through clenched teeth, we welcomed you like family. I laughed, soft and cold. You welcomed my market value. Not my mother. Not my name. Just the version of me that looked good on a brochure. Ronald stood, voice rising. This is personal. You're throwing away decades of work over a few misunderstood comments. This isn't revenge, I cut in. This is a reset. You used my image to raise funding while locking me out of boardrooms. You mocked the woman who built me from scratch and expected me to stay silent. But I was never just a pretty prop in your curated empire. I moved to the head of the table, Deborah's usual seat. Ran my fingers along the leather edge. Nice chair, I said. Good back support. I'll be needing it. Gasps again. the tension thick enough to slice. You think you've won? Ronald spat. You have no idea what you're dealing with. I gave him a small smile. No, I think you never realized who you were dealing with. Behind me, no applause. No dramatic soundtrack. Just silence. The kind that signals something irreversible. As I gathered the documents and prepared to leave, Deborah's voice followed me, tight, breathless. Adam, you're not going to let her do this, are you? Adam said nothing. The elevator ride down was quiet. I didn't check my phone. Didn't look back. Outside, reporters were gathering. Flashbulbs lit up like fireflies. I walked through them like fog, untouched, unbothered. Inside me, it wasn't vengeance burning. It was clarity. And that was more dangerous than rage could ever be. It didn't take long. By the end of that week, Urban Core, the once gilded darling of city development, started unraveling like a suit sewn too fast with cheap thread. It began with a quiet headline in a niche architecture blog. Urban Core faces internal restructuring amid audit announcement. By Monday, the whispers had turned into thunder. CNBC. Bloomberg. Even the local news station that rarely covered anything beyond school board meetings had a segment titled Scandal at the Core, Money, Manipulation, and a Wedding Walkout. The audit I ordered uncovered everything we suspected, only worse. One flagship project, praised by Deborah in multiple interviews, had a $3 million hole in the budget. Two of the contractors they had paid didn't even exist. No websites, no reports, not even a proper invoice trail. Just a couple of check numbers, signed off in haste and hidden in footnotes. City Hall froze Urban Core's pending payments and revoked their preferred vendor status. The mayor's office released a statement. Public funds deserve public trust. It was the politest way of saying, you're done here. Investors panicked. One by one, they pulled out, their names disappearing from project portfolios like magic tricks in reverse. Ronald dumped his remaining shares for pennies on the dollar, cash out before the ship sank. Deborah vanished from public events altogether. Her name, once listed on multiple non-profit boards and art foundations, quietly disappeared. Whispers of foreclosure, liquidated assets, and one heated voicemail leaked to the press where she screamed, she ruined everything. No, Deborah. I revealed everything. And Adam? He disappeared, too. No press conferences. No LinkedIn updates. Just radio silence. But I didn't track him. I didn't need to. His absence was the clearest statement he'd ever made. A man raised on power but not prepared for consequence. Urban Core didn't crumble because of one woman with a folder. It collapsed because the foundation had always been wrought, coated in charm, painted with connections, but hollow underneath. All I did was pull back the curtain. And the truth did what it always does. It echoed. 2 weeks later, Urban Core was blacklisted by the city. 2 board members quietly resigned and booked one-way tickets to somewhere without extradition. What remained was dust and headlines. The empire had collapsed, not with fireworks, but with a whisper of overdue truth. I didn't look back. Instead, I built forward. We launched the P Foundation on a rainy Thursday in March. The P wasn't for prestige or power. It stood for Pamela, my mother. The woman with calloused hands and unwavering grace. The foundation's mission was simple: offer scholarships and mentorship for girls from overlooked neighborhoods, girls who knew what it meant to stretch a dollar and still dream big. At the launch, the mayor handed me a plaque for contributions to urban renewal and ethical development. Cameras flashed. Applause echoed. I stood at the podium, cleared my throat, and looked out at a crowd that included council members, journalists, and a few kids clutching folders of college essays. I didn't grow up with a trust fund, I began. I grew up with a woman who could braid hair with one hand and carry groceries with the other. We didn't have land or legacy. We had coupons, cracked linoleum, and love. Real love. The kind that doesn't need a spotlight to be powerful. I paused, finding my mother's face in the front row. She wore the same earrings she'd had for 10 years. She smiled like the sky had finally opened for her. I'm not here to tear things down, I continued. I'm here to build. But sometimes, to build something real, you have to rip out what's been rotting underneath. Later that evening, as we packed up, security buzzed from the front desk. You have a visitor, the guard said. No appointment. Says it's personal. I didn't have to ask who. Adam walked in, damp from the rain, suit wrinkled, hair uncombed. He looked nothing like the polished man I had once agreed to marry. Monica, he said softly, I didn't know about the contracts. I didn't know they were using you like that. I swear. I didn't answer. I miss you, he added. Not the company. You. He sat down without being invited. His eyes scanned the room, not for me, but for opportunity. Old habit. Love, I said, isn't something you keep hidden when it's inconvenient. It's something you speak when it's hard. He opened his mouth, then closed it. You watched them mock my mother, I said. You stood next to me and smiled through it. I didn't know. But you did, I cut in. You knew. And you chose silence. I stood. So now I choose, too. He didn't follow. He knew better now. Outside, reporters still lingered under umbrellas. He walked out into the flashbulbs alone. That night, my mother and I returned to our usual diner. She sipped her tea, looked at me over her cup and said, You didn't have to do all this, you know. I smiled. I wasn't trying to win. I looked at her, the steam from her tea curling like a quiet halo around her face. I just needed the world to see what I've always known. She raised an eyebrow. That strength, I whispered, sometimes comes dressed in clearance rack dresses, armed with scissors and a smile. Sometimes, the greatest strength isn't in raising your voice, it's in choosing to walk away from what diminishes you. Monica's story is more than a tale of betrayal and revenge. It is a testament to the quiet, unwavering power of a daughter who refused to let her mother's dignity be trampled for the sake of appearances. In a world that often rewards those who play along, she chose courage over comfort, truth over pretense, and loyalty over love that came with conditions. Through Monica's eyes, we are reminded that love is not blind agreement or strategic silence. True love, whether for family, a partner, or oneself, is measured by what we're willing to stand up for, even if it means standing alone. Her journey wasn't about vengeance, it was about restoring value to what the world overlooked. The hands that raised her, the sacrifices no one applauded, the wisdom that came without diplomas. We live in a time where image often outweighs integrity. But Monica chose to tear down the illusion and build something rooted in truth. Her mother wasn't a footnote in her success story, she was the very foundation. And in honoring her, Monica redefined what legacy really means. The lesson is clear, never let comfort cost you your conscience. Never let silence become your shame. And never forget that real power is not found in control, but in the courage to protect what matters, even when it's inconvenient. Because sometimes, the most radical thing a person can do is simply refuse to be erased.